Blaze News, The Mandate, day 57. I'm Jill Savage. Tonight on the agenda, consumer prices continue to drop. Key metals used in manufacturing are hovering near their lowest levels since 2020, and crude oil prices have dropped to $60 a barrel. Energy Secretary Chris Wright weighed in on President Trump's fuel agenda. Take a look.
There's no formula for a good oil price. There's just a broader belief that lower cost diesel, lower cost gasoline, lower cost home heating, lower cost electricity, all of those are good for American consumers and good for businesses. That's President Trump's energy agenda, and I'm here to implement it.
The latest in tariff talk, China is refusing to back down in the tariff war. They're increasing tariffs on U.S. imports from 84 to 125%. And they've claimed that they will not retaliate any further against tariff increases. But some major announcements were made yesterday during yesterday's cabinet meeting, including how the Trump administration plans to combat China, fluoride in the water, and supporting our farmers and ranchers.
Jointly with Panama, to secure the Panama Canal from Chinese influence. That's something you said, we're taking back the canal. China's had too much influence. Obama and others let them creep in.
I'm working with Lee Zeldin to reassess the fluoride rules based upon the August release by the National Toxicity Program of new science that shows a direct inverse correlation between exposure to fluoride and IQ loss, particularly in children.
But your idea of using tariffs to ensure that we are putting forward and putting America first, no one understands that better than our farmers and our ranchers. But having said that, emerging from 4 years of Biden with a 30% increase in inputs for our farmers and ranchers, with an almost $50 billion trade deficit, when we left the first time it was zero, meaning that they are hurting.
In the lead up to the 2024 election, leftists clung to the talking point that Trump would go after Americans' Social Security. But the Trump administration has proven that this was fake news, and they've protected seniors' benefits by tackling fraud. The Social Security agency has shifted more of its employees to answering phones and taking in-person claims so beneficiaries can speak face-to-face with employees 5 days a week. Here's Trump last month reiterating his promise to protect Social Security.
I'm not going to touch Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Now, we're going to get fraud out of there. You know, you see where I talk about it all the time. We have people 250 years old and all, tremendous fraud. But that has nothing to do with that. We're going to get the fraud out, and everybody wants us to get the fraud out, and therefore you'll make it better.
As Caroline Levitt would say, promises made, promises kept. Finally, Donald Trump pushed for an end to daylight savings time. Might be the best news of the entire week. This morning on Truth Social, he wrote that the House and Senate should push hard for more daylight at the end of the day. Very popular. And most important, no more changing of the clocks, a big inconvenience. And for our government, a very costly event. And for people, a very annoying event that we no longer need to participate in. Let's go ahead and bring in Matthew Peterson. I mean, the daylight saving times. Let's stop the count right now, and let's just leave the clocks the way they are.
Yeah, I mean, trains, the era of trains was a long time ago, and it comes from people traveling on trains, and we're all sick and done with it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We see the cabinet, they were going through and had a huge meeting yesterday with President Trump. What do you think is going to stick out the most in your mind?
I actually don't think there's one thing. What sticks out the most, if there is one thing, is the fact that you had a cabinet meeting where every single person there had some serious reform to share, usually 3 or 4. So what you see is now the momentum of the EOs we had in the beginning, right? Every day, Trump signing something and it's super exciting, or he's, confirming people and it's super exciting. Now you see something that's even bigger, which is the entire edifice at the top of the federal government, the people who are driving the large cruise ship, right, actually turning this thing. And so this is really, really serious. Every single person was offering serious reforms to push the ball forward. And you can kind of see why the left is so terrified right now. I mean, they can't keep up with this. There's no keeping up with it. I mean, we can't even keep up on reporting it. Any one of the things that were said that day at the cabinet meeting would have been like a great article, right, in the past for a right-leaning publication. But there's like 5 of them in every department all the time, every day.
There's so much going on. And one of the good things for Americans is that consumer prices are going down. Things are a little bit more affordable than they were when Trump came into office. And just looking at the price of oil, which, of course, everything in the entire world is based on, okay, how much can we get for a barrel of oil? It's down to $60 right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is where, again, is that people need to calm down about the trade war and the tariffs and everything else. Oil is just one thing. I mean, the inflation numbers too. I mean, this is surprising numbers from the last quarter, right, that we're seeing now. And this is all good news, and it all means we're in a good position to actually fight this war.
We're going to have some surprising news. Don't go anywhere. Mike Howell will join us. He'll break down the shocking footage of the Red Cross aiding illegal immigration. You don't want to miss it. Well, today is the day. Angel Studios, you know them from The Sound of Freedom. They are releasing The King of Kings. So our father tells his son of the greatest story ever told, and it begins as a bedtime tale, and it becomes a life-changing journey. You go through his vivid imagination, and you see the boy walking alongside Jesus, witnessing his miracles, facing his trials, and understanding his ultimate sacrifice. The King of Kings invites us to rediscover the enduring power of hope, love, and redemption through the eyes of a child. And this film has such a high-profile cast of voices. It's Oscar Isaac, Pierce Brosnan, Mark Hamill, Uma Thurman, Forrest Whitaker, and there's also beautiful animation. It's just the perfect film to enjoy with your family this Easter. And I encourage everybody out there to go see The King of Kings. It's in theaters today. You can go get your tickets today at angel.com/Jill. That's angel.com/Jill. If you thought the border crisis was bad, it's even worse than you think. We have new undercover footage that shows us the Red Cross is actively helping migrants head north towards our border, fueling what some are now calling the border industrial complex. So here to break it down for us is Mike Howell. He's the Executive Director of Oversight Project. So Mike, thanks once again for joining us. You're fresh off your auto pen appearance here on the show. And now, what are you going to bring to us from the Red Cross?
Yeah, Red Cross, courtesy of your U.S. tax dollars, heading down to Colombia, right south of the most dangerous jungle in the world, the Darien Gap, where, the Red Cross is supposed to be keeping people out of danger. It's telling them how to go into the jungle where there's jungle cats, like nomadic gangs and all sorts of danger. Also, they can illegally immigrate to the United States. It's still happening, and you're still paying for it.
This really is insane. I mean, zoom out for a minute, though, and talk to us about the border industrial complex.
So the border industrial complex means basically all of the different entities, to include the international organizations. A lot of this is through the UN, International Organization for Migration, some of the supernatural or national NGOs like Open Societies Foundation, et cetera. And then part of it, too, is the hundreds of millions of dollars we spent per year during the Biden administration to not only facilitate the movement of people around the United States once they break into the country, but to get them here in the first place. It is an entire, well-organized, decades-long in the making complex. And it is what allowed the country to be invaded over the Biden administration. It could not have been accomplished without the coordinated effort. And this means things as simple as handing people water and shelter and plane tickets, to the more complex, to organizing the legal efforts to help people ally on their asylum applications, and then also the political pressure campaigns that manifest here in the United States. And you hear their same talking points all the way from the White House and the Biden administration to Congress on a daily basis.
Well, I don't think that anybody in our audience is going to be like, oh my gosh, the Red Cross, they're such a great organization, right? This has kind of been known for some time, but how do they get away with like the narrative of all of this? Just saying, going through this and saying, how do you go through and actually try to make this appealing to the American people in one way or another?
Yeah, good luck, Red Cross. They're in the political hot seat, and it's a very organized structure of the Red Cross. You have like the mega Red Cross, then the national affiliates. So this is the Colombian Red Cross, which the United States does fund in some capacity. But for the Red Cross name brand, I think they're in serious jeopardy. I mean, this is an organization which people, when they hear the name, think of assisting people in need of disaster resources and whatnot, not pushing them into a disaster like they are in Colombia. I know Joe at the Blaze, who published the great exclusive, reached out to them for comment, heard nothing. That doesn't surprise me. What I think is going to force them to comment and should happen next is both the United States Congress and the White House and all the other technicals for which they have relationships in the U.S. government should be asking questions of them. What the heck have you been doing with our money? And tell us why you deserve a single more cent.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that we're learning, that what you're doing is so important because it's showing the granular details of how this thing worked. And people might know, like Red Cross, you know, they've gone woke and everything's gone woke and whatever, and somehow all these illegals are coming in. Go into some of the details about this that are really striking. I mean, what were they actually doing on the ground?
Yeah, all sorts of stuff. I mean, one of the big clips in that video is they have a psychiatrist. Think about this. The Red Cross has a psychiatrist to mentally prepare illegal aliens from all around the world, not just, people from south of, the border in our hemisphere, but people from all over every single continent in the world who've traversed through the Darien Gap, preparing them with the psychological fortitude, I guess they need to know they're about to enter one of the most dangerous jungles and potentially be kidnapped by tribes. But then also things like giving them food and water and maps, how to navigate and get into the U.S. illegally. Everything in which one illegal could need to get to the U.S., the Red Cross is attempting to provide them. And they're working side by side with another organization. This is why we have to use the term border industrial complex, because there's so many of them. Med Global down there, who's providing other resources. And then once they get through the Darien Gap and go on north, they're going to be greeted by more NGOs that help them along the way. And if they are, quote unquote, lucky enough to break into the U.S., they'll be met by even more of our domestic-based NGOs to make sure they have everything not only they need to survive in the U.S., but also to evade ICE. This is what we put out, just last week. Some of our taxpayer-funded nonprofits, this one in New York, are advising businesses on how to basically harden their defenses in case ICE shows up. I mean, this one place, a restaurant, had a button called La Migra, which they would push in case ICE shut up, that alerted the illegals that, now it's time to hide and to put the restaurant into shutdown mode, all with your tax dollars.
So you just laid out the problems very well there. So what does Donald Trump and Tom Homan, what do they need to do then to secure the border and actually stop and in return some normalcy down to this border?
Right. So they've done a pretty good job on the border thus far, but the complex is still pushing people through. The best thing they could do, the most important thing they can do, because this is the most important border security you could have, is mass deportations. This never ends completely until illegals know that more likely than not, they will be deported as soon as they get here. And so what Tom Homan and the White House need is a massive supercharging of ICE removal resources to get people deported. That doesn't just mean criminal illegals. In other words, only 400,000 out of the 20 plus million here. It means everyone who's in the country illegally, there are the resources for ICE and any other entity that wants to assist to be able to remove them ASAP. We need to get millions and millions of people out until everyone else in the world realizes it's not worth it to come.
So we got Med Global, we got Red Cross, we got these agencies that now proven, we've seen what they've done, and it's even psychologically preparing, as you say, with a psychologist to get you pumped up and give you all the tools you need to go across the Darien Gap where 55 people die in 2024. And meet you on the other side. The whole thing is open. You just laid it bare, right? Okay, so how do we punish these bastards? What do we do to these NGOs who are basically tearing down the country and supporting the violation of the rule of law? Is there a way to punish them now?
Yeah, so NGOs usually operate with some sort of tax exempt status from the IRS, which has kind of been handed out like candy over recent years, particularly in the rise of the Obama administration, when they figured out they could just pay NGOs to do things they otherwise couldn't constitutionally do. And so one massive hammer the administration has is revoking the IRS exemptions. They also need to criminally prosecute some of these people to set an example. Some of our work has resulted in not only the NGO we expose shutting down, but ones in their immediate networks also changing behaviors or shutting down. And so criminally prosecuting them from, the administration and Department of Justice would send a massive deterrent throughout the community. And to date, there's not any that I could think of that's actually been prosecuted outside of Texas going after a few. There needs to be massive efforts to recoup and demand back the funds that have already been given out, and they're still winding through the system. And then moreover, like, these NGOs exist because they can deliver on the end good, which is illegal immigration and remaining in the US. So if we were to flip that on its head and have people realistically expect they will be deported, then these nonprofits won't have a business line anymore. And so mass deportations is the simplest thing we can do, but there's a lot of other things we can do in the interim.
This is incredible stuff, and I hope you keep it up, and I hope Tom Homan and others take up the charge here, because we have to hold these NGOs accountable after the fact. And the worst thing that could happen, right, is that we just keep on moving and they just keep on moving. We pretend this didn't happen, but it did happen. I have to ask you though, what else is Project Oversight working on? What else are you working on right now? Anything else that our viewers should know about?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that's taken up a lot of our attention is you've noticed these executive orders from President Trump as it relates to the weaponized law firms, and they're setting aside massive pro bono amounts. Well, we've gone to virtually all of them and asked them for $10 million each. And so we're testing whether these law firms actually have the commitment to de-weaponize. And the process is working out right now, but we're gonna prove whether or not these are just token set-asides or if they're actually willing to put their money where their mouth is and de-weaponize. Separate than that, very active on the de-weaponization front here in DC. I think everyone out there, even the people on the inside of the administration, know that accountability isn't being meted out as quickly as we'd like. We're trying to work with our partners to ensure that it actually does happen. And then in the states, we're going to start suing some governors pretty quick here. There's a lot of resistance actors using government funds to stand in the way of the mandate and to basically use their dying blue states as a political platform for their 2028 presidential campaigns to be the biggest fly in the ointment of President Trump. And so we're going to give them some of their own music right back at them. And we'll stay on top of the nonprofits that are interrupting the mandate for mass deportations. I was with Border Czar Tom Homan yesterday, and he committed to looking into this Red Cross matter. So I expect there'll be more action on that soon.
And my last one, you went from Oversight Project to It's Your Gov on X. Tell everybody what's going on there.
So It's Your Gov is our slogan because, everyone needs a slogan. And so we're still the Oversight Project, but Heritage announced a couple of weeks ago that the Oversight Project is becoming its own entity. So we are more legally and structurally nimble and able to do all of those things that I laid out. We made a lot of noise leading up to the 2024 election, but given the change in the battlefield, so to speak, we needed to legally restructure ourselves so we can fight not just across the country, but as you saw around the world. And that means a change of all sorts of things. We'll be a C4 organization for you IRS nerds out there. It means we can be more overtly political because, frankly, these are political fights. This is the left trying to commandeer your government tax dollars to not only further an invasion, but to undermine basically every system in the world. And we can't be afraid to say that for tax compliance reasons.
Mike, that is music to our ears. And sorry, not sorry about your Duke Blue Devils. Please come back on the show. We love you, Mike Howell. We love you.
Wow. I'm going to have to think about it after that one.
Oh, so good. I had to. You knew it was coming there.
Brutal.
After our back and forth there on X, Mike. So, thanks so much. We'll have Chris Bedford's exclusive interview on putting America first in global trade coming up. Chris Bedford sat down with Oren Cass to discuss what the Trump administration has to accomplish globally to restore American industrialization. Watch.
Joining me now is Oren Cass, the chief economist and founder of American Compass, and also a native of Acton, Massachusetts, who went to elementary school literally 150 feet maybe from the strange school I went to. Thank you for joining us, Oren.
Great to see you. Thanks for having me.
So this seems to be your time to really shine. I mean, for many years now, you've been voicing an important voice on the need in the United States for reshoring industry, for having an industrial policy, for having Republicans in particular pushing a regulatory regime, a tax regime, that enables families to grow, that enables the middle class to prosper, that essentially tries to create an American economy that's not entirely dependent on shipping paper dollars overseas. These last week or so has been a wild ride for tariffs in the United States, the new regime. To start more broadly, what does the Trump administration and the United States more broadly need to accomplish here to show that they're actually serious about trying to reinvigorate the American industrial base and the American middle class?
Well, I think there's something we need to accomplish globally, and then we need to see the results of it domestically. And what I think they're trying to do globally that is so important and so encouraging to see at the center of our discussion is to really move on from the sort of global liberal world order model that we've been operating in certainly since the end of the Cold War, that says it's almost like the sort of whatever is good for General Motors is good for America. This idea that just as long as we have an open, free trading global economy, the U.S. wins, and therefore if other countries want to kind of abuse their positions in it, if they want to, pursue an aggressive export strategy that hollows out our manufacturing industry, that's fine. We should just smile and turn the other cheek, or we should even say, thank you very much, sir, for sending us the stuff. And, I think two things have happened. One is it's been very actually encouraging over just the last couple of years to see economists start to admit that that's just wrong. Like even Janet Yellen last year said, the classic economic theory says just say thank you very much. I would never say that again. And I just did a roundtable discussion at the New York Times with Jason Furman, who historically has sort of tried to say, exports aren't a good thing. Exports are the bad thing you have to work at to get the good thing, which is the cheap stuff. And he's now, acknowledging, yeah, look, there are a lot of reasons that being able to make things does matter. And so that's a really important shift in terms of what we want to accomplish. The other really important shift is just to recognize that there is no global liberal world order. If there ever was, it is now gone. That we are now in a multipolar world. China is going to exert its influence and have its sphere. And so what the United States really needs to stop doing is just being this benevolent power that seeks to just make everything wonderful for everybody, and instead focus on its own interests and say, we want to have a strong set of alliances. We want to have a large bloc that is working together on free trade and security, but it's not going to be free. There are actually going to be conditions here. And so what we want to get to is a world where we have that bloc, but everybody agrees that trade needs to be more balanced, that everybody should have a strong industrial base, and that everybody needs to hold hands and keep China out. And so that's what we're pushing toward, I think, globally. And if we do that, I think the benefits that we will see domestically is a lot of investment in reindustrialization, in building back up our own industrial base.
Now, it seems to have moved your way towards the policies that you have prescribed over years of writing in the first week of this trade war, as opposed to a formulaic way of going after all these different countries. It's a broader 10% tariff with a specific targeting of China. Do you think that with all the shifts and all the changes the administration has in the negotiation aspects of these tariffs, that they've so far been able to maintain the credibility that they need going forward in these negotiations, not just with China, but with the 75 plus global economies that have come to the United States to negotiate?
I think that's exactly the right question. And, it's a place where, frankly, we've been quite critical of the initial Liberation Day moves. I think it's so heartening to see an administration that is pushing this direction, that especially is willing to acknowledge, there are short-term costs to getting to the long-term benefits. And we're willing to make that trade-off. We're willing to make the upfront investment. That's exactly what we need more of in our leadership. But in the specifics, I think there's been a lot of room for improvement in, first of all, just how rapidly we disrupt things. Especially if you are going to pursue a strategy that has upfront costs, you really want to minimize those costs. And I think the speed and the drama, and to your point, some of the uncertainty and moving back and forth with some of these moves is creating a lot of unnecessary cost, where I think what they've now landed on, which is look, here's what we want to go toward. Here's kind of the threat that is in place. But let's pause a little bit and have some time now to negotiate and try to work things out. I think that's a much healthier model. I think even with China, where I very much would like to see us ultimately have high permanent tariffs, again, I don't know really what we gain from going, over 100% from day one. I think if you look at it from the perspective of a company that we want to invest in the U.S., maybe move production from China, you want the threat that is going to get them to move as quickly as possible. And what they care about is, what is the tariff going to be 2 years from now? And so if you say, look, we are going to 50, 60% tariffs over the next few years, they will start moving as quickly as possible. The additional, and already today the tariff is this high, causes a lot of disruption and pain for exactly the folks we ultimately want to see be successful. And so that's where I think, a little bit more of a methodical, paced, phased-in model with clear communication about where we're going would frankly deliver more upside than we're getting right now with a lot less of that cost.
You've expressed some skepticism over that early blast on Liberation Day. Ross Douthat, who did a long interview with you in the New York Times last week, had even, I think, more reserves. He thought this might sabotage the entire conservative Republican experiment. But is there a case to be made that the Trump administration's need to recreate a global trade order where countries are essentially adopting American policies on trade with China if they want to be inside of this enclosed fence? Maybe the best way to do that is to have 75 countries rushing to see who could be the first one in the door of the White House to be the first person to negotiate, the second, the third, the fourth, as opposed to going to these individual countries who make a lot of money off of Chinese markets, to go to them one by one and say, here's the new way you're going to have to do this, from the White House being the request, or as opposed to a foreign government.
Well, I think you certainly want them rushing to the table, but we also have to be realistic about our capacity to greet them when they do that, right? It's not really practical for the United States to negotiate 70 separate agreements simultaneously, especially at a point where I don't think we've yet made it sufficiently clear what exactly we want the content of those negotiations to be. And so one thing, I wrote about yesterday for Commonplace, is that a real advantage of the 90-day pause is that it allows for some staggering. That if you think about, just even if all you wanted to do was maximize U.S. leverage, starting with 70 countries at once doesn't do that, because what you've done is, each country you're targeting feels the pain of the U.S. action. It still has lots of other trading partners. The U.S. feels the pain of all of the actions at once. It's frankly less credible to say that you're going to sustain simultaneously tariffs at that level on everybody, as opposed to saying, look, you have to make sure the threat is credible. And at this point, I don't think anybody doubts the Trump administration is very serious about going in this direction, about accepting pain when it needs to. But then if you have that 90-day pause, if you say, here's how we're going to phase things in over 6 months or a year, every country is still rushing to be the first one in the door at that point. But now you get to say, great, well, let's see who we can make the best agreements with first, right? Let's see if we can get toward that 90-day window and actually have made an agreement with Japan. Maybe we've made an agreement with Australia. Now we have that template for what we want these to look like. Now we've moved them to the side. We're happy with our arrangement with them. Let's make sure we're in the middle of negotiations with a few other major partners with whom we can say, this is great, this is progressing, so we're gonna push off any tariffs a little bit further. And now if you have a couple of major partners who are not coming to the table, and now you say, hey, look, other people did, you guys didn't, now these tariffs do go into effect, that's a much, much more credible consequence. That's not going to disrupt markets the way the Liberation Day move did. Other companies all through that period are going to have a time to start looking at what's going on, asking, what do we have to be prepared for? Who should we be betting on versus betting against? And so I think it's just, even again, taking fully what the administration wants to accomplish and how it wants to do it, I think this more phased in, staggered approach is a much more effective way of getting there.
I'm getting some George W. Bush war on terror vibes from the early announcements, where it seems like the messaging from the White House has not prepared the American people for what it will look like to have their 401ks hit by a breakdown, a decrease in Chinese dollars being dropped into the stock market, to have housing values and other values hit by a decrease in Chinese dollars being poured into our economy. Does there need to be sharper messaging from the White House to get the broader public on board? For every congressional race is going to have to deal with, even if it's just a 6-person company or a 100-person company that gets its parts from China, getting a sob story from corporate media that are very much against any kind of change to the status quo. And also the elites of the United States who make a lot of money on the status quo being against this. How can the administration message, or where could it do better? Where is it doing well? Where is it doing terribly on actually trying to bring a country that doesn't want to actually have this conversation, it seems, and into a negotiation with a dictatorship that has no conversations at all?
I think it's a great point that, you know, the clarity and the messaging, partly that it's a substantive point. If you want to do the negotiations well, you have to have a lot more clarity about what exactly you're pursuing. But then purely as a political matter, if you want it to be sustainable and popular politically, which ultimately then goes to your credibility and your ability to get what you want substantively, I think there's a lot of room for better communication. You know, a really interesting comparison here is what Ronald Reagan did when he came into office in 1981. And, you know, the U.S. had a lot of significant economic challenges at that point. And Reagan and with Paul Volcker at the Fed, they intentionally shoved the United States into a very sharp recession. I mean, interest rates went up above 20%, unemployment went up above 10%, the stock market went down significantly. And then, you know, that wasn't a couple weeks of pain here. That was a significant pain that certainly stretched through toward the midterms. You look at where they were on Election Day 1984, unemployment was still above 7%. And Reagan won the biggest landslide re-election, I believe, since George Washington. So it can be done, but if you look at how Reagan communicated it, I've compared his first joint address to Congress to Trump's first joint address to Congress. And I think what you see in the Reagan address is a very clear plan, a very clear diagnosis of here's what's wrong, here's why it has gone wrong, here are the mistakes that we made, here's what it's going to take to turn it around, here are the costs that are associated with that, but why they are worth bearing, and here's what we can expect to come out of the other side with. And I think the Trump administration needs to provide that kind of message. Ideally, it needs to come directly from the president. You know, obviously, Vice President Vance has been a very effective communicator for the administration. If they want it to be a big set-piece speech from Vance, they could do it that way as well. But I think you're absolutely right that, you know, it is heartening to see the administration be willing to take on these costs and push this way. But for it to be successful, you do need to make sure you're being very clear with the American people about that. Especially, as you said, in this environment where you're going to have the elites, you're going to have the media pushing as aggressively as possible the story that this is a disaster and a failure. And that's where it's so funny, especially to see these left of center folks suddenly decide that the stock market is the ultimate arbiter of the quality of policy, right? I mean, you've got like people like Larry Summers out there saying like, well, here's how much the stock market went down. And that is essentially a perfect proxy for the well-being of the society. So we can just multiply that loss by 5 and find out how terrible this is for our country. And that's a ludicrous way of thinking about these things. It's not something that, you know, obviously the left of center has ever believed. It's not something the media has ever believed until it's a chance to score points against Donald Trump. And so, you know, it's fine to complain about that, but at the end of the day, that's an exogenous factor. That's just a given in our politics, and the administration is responsible for having a plan that takes that into account and is likely to succeed in the face of it.
Do you think the president has a specific plan to isolate China, create a new trading system, or do you think it's more a plan to just get the best deal he can to make it easier to sell iPhones and Teslas in China than it currently is?
I think it's a really great question, and I think we've seen indicators on both sides. You know, I think if you look at I think his sharpest advisors on this, certainly Vance, Besson at Treasury, Stephen Mirren, chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Jameson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative. Their messages have always been very consistently, in what I can read in it, that they do see this world sort of separating into two spheres. Obviously Rubio, now as his Secretary of State, has always been sort of most consistent, going all the way back to 2018, 2019 on the nature of this conflict with China. And from everything I can find, it seems that they obviously see things this way. Besson has emphasized, even as in negotiations with Mexico and Canada, the importance of seeing Mexico start to move against China, the expectation that he wants to see Canada do the same. And so that is that is one story. At the same time, you certainly see comments, even from the president himself, speculating that maybe it'd be great if BYD was building EV factories in the United States. That he does see the relationship with Xi still more about kind of a showdown that is supposed to lead to a negotiation of some sort. And so I think there's obviously a huge need for more clarity there. And then with it, I think, and this is where the comments from someone like Rubio are so useful, I think there just needs to be a clear reckoning with reality, that this isn't a question of what we might like. It's just a question of the facts of the world as it is, that there is no pathway to a deal with a communist authoritarian regime with a state-controlled economy that leads to healthy free trade. It's just not on the table. And what we've seen over the last 25 years is that trying to embrace China does not move them in a constructive direction. To the contrary, it just makes it that much easier for them to cheat and lie and steal and in fact become more authoritarian. And so for the short to medium term, the only real choice here is to accept reality and to do what is best for the United States in that reality, which is to really separate our economy from China's. And I think the administration needs to be a lot clearer on that. And then we're in a position to really ask our allies for the same. And if we can build a U.S.-led bloc that is thinking that way, I think it will be a very good thing for the United States.
Oren Cass with American Compass. I could fill a half an hour asking more questions, but my co-host would be annoyed with me. So where can people find more of your work and American Compass's work?
So all of our in-depth work on these trade issues, on China, on globalization, is at americancompass.org. I mentioned Commonplace, which is the new magazine we've launched, which is doing a great symposium this week on all of these topics. That's at commonplace.org. And then for the very latest, I'm on X at Oren_Cass.
Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you'll come back soon.
I would love to. Thanks so much.
Don't go anywhere. One of our favorites, Representative Brandon Gill, will take the spotlight in our clip of the week after this. As we all get ready for the weekend, it's basically here at this point. We have to go out on a good note on Friday night. So we are going to bring you the clip of the week. It's brought to you by Representative Brandon Gill, one of our favorites here on the show now. He was grilling Neill Franklin, who is a retired mayor from the Baltimore Police Department. And he was doing this because he was trying to say this, his city was safe. If anybody has been to Baltimore, you know that's not true. Watch Representative Gill here.
Do you think Baltimore is a safe city?
Of course it is.
Okay. Do you know what the homicide rate is in Baltimore?
Exactly, no.
It's about 35 per 100,000. Do you know what the homicide rate is in the rest of the United States?
No, I don't.
I can tell you that the homicide rate in Baltimore is about 5 times the national average. Do you know how Baltimore's robbery rate compares to the rest of the United States?
At the moment, no, I don't.
You don't? It's about 8.4 times the national average. Do you know how Baltimore's assault rate compares to the national average?
No, I don't.
It's about 3.4 times higher. Does that sound like a safe city to you?
Safe to me and my family members.
So that's safe to you?
Is that safe to you, Matt Peterson, when you look at Baltimore? I don't think that safety is necessarily the first thing that comes to mind when I think of that city.
Yeah, I always think the time I rode in a rogue taxi cab, like one of these one-offs, dude just had his car before Uber. This used to happen. Exceedingly dangerous thing to do, especially in Baltimore. And I remember we were driving from Baltimore to DC. I just got out of the airport, right? And they used to have these rogue drivers. And I said, I need to stop. I need to get a few things at the store. And I stopped, and all my stuff is in the car, and we just look at each other. And it was a great moment. It was fine. I got my stuff, and we went. But Baltimore was like, it was like rolling, playing Russian roulette a little bit. And it hasn't changed. It has changed over the years, but it hasn't changed that much. And what's interesting is that people are still sort of in denial. Sad.
In one of our recent trips to Washington, D.C., one of our flights got canceled, and they tried to reroute us, right? They put me going into Baltimore, and I was like, we're going to need to redo that because I am not flying into Baltimore by myself with you flying into a separate airport for that. I was like, absolutely not. I will go anywhere except for Baltimore. But, Washington, D.C. on the mind. We watched Trump's cabinet earlier today, and it's just, all of the Avengers are assembling right now in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, so we've moved into the second era, right, of the new Trump administration. So the first part of it was the boom, 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 was the executive orders every day, was the excitement of, who's going to be confirmed or who's going to get this post. And now all of a sudden, most people are in place. There's still people waiting to be confirmed. I mean, we were talking earlier today, right, about Joe Kent. Other people are still like coming in to the administration, are very interesting. But now you have most people are in there, and they've done some of the initial groundwork you have to do in a large bureaucratic body. And so you're starting to see what the actual reforms will be, what the actual priorities will be in these different agencies and departments. So the cabinet meeting this week was the first time you really saw that in total. Like you saw everyone together going around talking about what they were working on. What was striking about that moment is that everyone is working on very serious reforms that in most circumstances would constitute big news, during other eras. But now no one can keep up with it. So what I would say to you is that regardless of where you're at in the news cycle, and hopefully you're not just buffeted on the breeze of the news cycle or the waves of the news cycle, because you'll be very unhappy if you keep letting yourself do that. I hope you have some separation from it. But if you really look at what's going on, whether people realize it or not, the momentum that you saw before is now actually a sort of like earth-shattering wave that just is moving inexorably forward. So even though they're going to say the administration is disorganized or, the administration is fighting amongst itself, what's really going on is you now see not a flurry of activity, but a slow, solid move to actually reform what underlies these structures. And that is very interesting. It's very hopeful. It's incredible to see. And it's incredible also to see the unity that you see. Everyone involved is unified on the large things, and they're all talking about fundamental reform or measures that go right to the heart of the deep state or the administrative state. And that to me is, I wouldn't say this, I'm not a shill for the administration. I wouldn't say this unless I really thought it was true. I've been criticizing Republicans for decades. So you're now seeing the serious deep magic happen. You're seeing the serious move forward to really start to press. And so what that means, if you're going to game this out, is that you haven't really even yet seen the real resistance. The left has been knocked on its you-know-what. It's been, sort of shocked and stunned. Yeah, they're out there. They're doing some of this violence, terrible violence with the Teslas and whatever and attacking Elon. But you haven't really seen any real resistance yet because they've been stunned. And now you're going to see really the stuff that hurts, that will bring pain to the administrative state. That's what's about to start happening. What will bring pain to outside interests like big pharma, the big environmentalist, interests. All of that stuff is now going to start to feel the pinch and feel the hurt. And I think the left is going to take still some time, but that's the stuff that's going to really generate a real reaction, a real even more violent reaction to the administration itself. And also, and I'll stop with this, Last point is, as the administration really starts to affect this change, as they're actually in charge of these agencies and they really start moving pieces around the dial, this is the time to really hold people accountable. If you're in the media or in the audience, the fight has only just begun, and we have to hold people accountable from the past, right? As we were talking about with Mike Howell, all the NGOs that let millions of people in here illegally. And we also have to hold people accountable in the present who are actually still ensconced within the bureaucracy. And so the battle now it gets really interesting, and we're entering a much more serious part of it.
I like that second phase that you're talking about. We went out to Washington, D.C. for the inauguration. We were there back in February, and we're actually going to be going back here in just a little bit. But I'm curious to see once we get there, because the last time we were there, they had the Post-it notes still on the doors saying, okay, this is where the scheduling room is happening. Right. This is where this office is, right? To see just the bare bones of the administration. It was a skeleton staff that they had there at that point in time, to see how much that will be built out and to see phase 2 start to being fully implemented, because that is now that next step that we have to go through to join the fight, to get things going there in Washington, D.C., to take down the deep state, the administrative state.
No, absolutely. Because now the bustle, it's like bustling, like it's starting to really, the engine's really starting to rev and the car's starting to move. If you remember, someone there used the analogy of it moved so fast in the beginning, right? The train left the station, left the wheels behind. But that's because they weren't fully staffed. They didn't have everything going on. Now the whole army is starting to move, and that's where the power is coming in. That's what's very interesting about what's going on. But of course, as you know, the main thing I'll be happy about is that as opposed to inauguration, I won't be freezing for 2 hours at night trying to get back to my hotel room in the cold.
That was the difference for us personally between difference for Trump 1.0, Trump 2.0, Trump 2.0 to keep him safe. They wanted to make sure that they basically blocked down any road that any car could ever drive down. So Matthew Peterson trying to leave one of the inaugural balls.
Yeah. I was one of these big fancy things that Jill Savage
very
was at,
rough time.
I was just a man of the people, trying to walk home.
You were in the middle of all of the chaos and actually had to get on a bike in January in D.C. That sounds like a good time.
Well, no, the guy on the bike was doing this, and I was in the back, the back.
The good news is,
please take me wherever it's warm.
The cherry blossoms are out. It's much warmer in Washington, D.C. now. While everybody is coming in, the army is assembling, the Avengers are assembling, you're not going to be freezing either. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah. So we're going to go. It's going to be good. And we're going to check in on all these people and see what they're doing, including Chris Bedford, by the way.
Yes. I don't know if we're going to get another Bedford bar tour, but if we do, we will definitely let you know. And it is just to go through and check in one more time, just to make sure that everybody out there in Washington, D.C. is actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. We'll bring that knowledge to you firsthand. But thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.